Story 1. A guest had a heart attack and collapsed to the floor. The next guest stepped over him and stood straddling his legs to take his spot at the dice table while the paramedics worked on the man on the floor. The man on the floor died, and the other guest lost all his money. I watched 2 other people die, not as dramatically. Story 2. This is quite tame compared to these replies. I often heard from patrons who had come in on payday and lost their entire paycheck. One man I spoke to at the delicatessen had a $5,000 pay loss, which resulted in 6 ham sandwiches comped. He said, "At least I have lunch this week." We had a couple of elderly people die at machines, but it was not a dramatic scene. I guess the people staring at the screen, just feet from a corpse, is unsettling. The worst thing that happened to me was when the air conditioning and ventilation stopped working. It was 110 degrees Fahrenheit at the 2 flat-top grills I was manning, but even worse was the smell on the floor. It was best described as a nursing home full of cigar smoke mixed with rotting garbage. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in casinos is doing God's work. Story 3. An elderly woman came in pushing her even older mother in a wheelchair. The woman's mother passed away at some point in the casino. The woman did not realize until they got to lunch, and her mother could not be awakened to respond or order anything. The most unusual part was when our manager, at the restaurant where they came for lunch, asked if there was anything he could do for her while she waited for the emergency medical technicians. She said, "No, that's fine. I'll just finish my lunch," and sat there across from her deceased mother, eating lunch. Story 4. Had to ban a disruptive woman from using the men's bathroom as a brothel. She was hiding in a stall, then popping out to offer services. I was fairly certain she had multiple sexually transmitted diseases. A customer told me she was in there sitting at a urinal while a large man was openly engaging with her. I initially thought it was just a problem customer, but then I walked in to find the man with his pants down, deeply involved with her, who was sitting at the urinal, covered in unsanitary fluids. I banned both of them, and she returned screaming that I was interfering with her business and threatening to sue me. Security escorted her off the property. There have been numerous requests for trades, from sexual favors to attempts to fence stolen goods and drug transactions. People can be astonishing. Story 5. I work at a pawn shop that is 6 miles from 3 casinos. We hear many sad stories. An elderly man came in on the 3rd. He received his Social Security check on the 1st, but blew it all at the casino. Now he had no money for the rest of the month. A man who lived in a town 60 miles away would stop in and pawn items. We asked why he came all the way to our shop, as it seemed suspicious. He worked the 3rd shift, went home to load a few items in his trunk, then drove 60 miles here to the casinos. If he lost, he would pawn whatever he had brought so he had gas money to go home. Most often, he would take the money right back to the casino. He spent 8 to 10 hours at the casino, drove home, slept a bit, then went to work. I worked at a casino for a while, and it was interesting. There were the creatures. Many people will not bother printing out tickets if the amounts are low. They just leave them on the machine. Creatures walk around the casino looking for these machines and print out the tickets, often worth 3 or 25 cents. When they have enough tickets, they put them in a slot and get 1 or 2 pulls hoping to win. Police were often called because people would leave their children in the car while they gambled. I got to see the book of bounced checks. It was surprising how many upstanding, prominent citizens were in the book. Story 6. Men always nervous at my poker table. One particular player must wear diapers because the whole room can tell when he soils himself, which is more often than one would think. I wouldn't say these are the worst things, but they aren't the greatest when having to sit so close to these people. Story 7. I worked at a casino for about a year, and there's one regular I'll never forget. I was a slot attendant, and management made sure we knew who the big spenders were. We were told to prioritize them, get to them fast, and take care of them well. Naturally, I assumed these were wealthy people spending disposable income for fun. But one cold night shattered that illusion. There was this woman, always cheerful and kind to everyone. She was one of the top spenders in the entire casino, easily dropping 6 figures a year. That night, she was in my section, just sitting and staring blankly at the machine. No money in it, No activity, just vacant. I went over to check on her, and she quietly told me that her heat had been shut off at home. She couldn't afford to pay her utility bill. Let that sink in. One of our highest rollers, sitting alone in a cold casino because her actual home was colder. I later found out she'd been in a serious car accident a few years earlier. She was tied up in a lawsuit and had borrowed money from nearly everyone she knew, saying a big payout was coming. She genuinely believed it. I left the job not long after, but I still think about her often. I watched her win thousands of dollars on multiple occasions and lose just as much, if not more. It hit me hard how gambling can completely warp someone's sense of safety and comfort. In her darkest hour, she went to the one place that felt familiar and safe, not realizing it was also the place that had helped bring her to that low point. Now, whenever I see someone hit a jackpot on a slot machine, I can't help but wonder, are they walking out a little richer or a little more lost? Story 8. A regular customer suddenly died of a heart attack, and people just stepped over him. One woman sat at his machine and started playing his remaining credits. Nobody cared. Another regular's wife would call in desperate and crying, begging us to cut him off because they were losing their house and he had depleted the children's college savings as well. Story 9. I worked in marketing for several casinos in Atlantic City. The owner of several properties was a complete loser, even though he considered himself a legend. He regularly stiffed suppliers, vendors, and contractors, driving many to bankruptcy. He frequently broke contracts and negotiated payments in his favor so that companies would receive anything at all. When he did pay, you would be lucky if it was in 90 days, even if the contract stated payment was due in 30 days. He used some of the local New Jersey and New York City mob as muscle if people got out of line. He used his wife as the spokesmodel in much of the marketing for his properties. Eventually, he bankrupted all of his casinos and sold everything at a loss. I wonder what ever happened to that man. Story 10. A previous boss of mine worked at a casino in Atlantic City. He said he saw all kinds of terrible things, but the worst was when they had to close the main lobby because a man jumped from the 4th floor after losing. Story 11. Truly the worst thing I have ever seen was a woman in an electric wheelchair using 3 machines simultaneously with a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other. The worst part was that she was not having fun. She looked like she was not even thinking, just a zombie pushing buttons. Story 12:1. Saw a drunk man urinate on the gaming floor. He denied doing it. 2. A man left his soiled boxers on the floor, ran to his car, and sped off. 3. Saw a woman rub her groin on a displayed prize as she was being expelled. 4. Encountered a disturbed man with a fresh gunshot wound. He said he was a poet and admired a famous rapper. He also claimed his uncle was his father and that he needed money to buy a train ticket back to San Francisco. 5. Couples engaging in inappropriate behavior at the bar and sniffing their fingers. I have seen many other incidents, but these are the most notable moments. Story 13. Elderly individuals soiling their pants and casino chairs because they did not want to get up to go to the bathroom. A maintenance worker had to clean the chairs. Story 14. We had a woman who was cashing out her husband's retirement savings without his knowledge. He worked at Boeing and she gambled all day. She went through about $70,000 before I stopped keeping a running total. She would refuse to get up from the table if she thought she was on a winning streak, so she would just urinate herself. The dealers would complain, the managers would ignore it and just throw out the chairs when she left. The Romani people were always difficult to manage, trying to feed an entire caravan of people by playing $20 on blackjack. I once stood at an empty blackjack table and watched a woman die in front of her daughter from a grand mal seizure at their dinner table. That one still haunts me. Story 15. I do not work at a casino, but I drive a bus and my route goes past 2 of them. One man said after his mother died, he received a large settlement and proceeded to lose $150,000 at a casino. Just imagine if his mother had known how he spent that money. Story 16. I did not work at the actual casino but was a subcontractor hired to paint a ceiling. It was around 6:30 a.m. I was in the public bathroom when the door burst open. I heard a man frantically unload, and it was probably the worst smell of my life. I decided to wait it out, After he left, I sheepishly exited only to find his completely destroyed khakis in the garbage can. I am pretty sure he lost all his money, then had an accident and ran out quickly. Story 17. In the early 1990s, my sales team was solicited by sex workers at the Tropicana who were probably at most 15 years old, possibly 12. One said, "I will do anything for tokens. I have not eaten for days." When we told the casino staff, they just shrugged and said, "We cannot do anything unless they are on the gaming floor itself. That is a hotel problem outside the designated areas." Story 18. An elderly lady and her two daughters were eating at my bar. She went face down in her mashed potatoes. Emergency medical technicians were called and revived her. At that point, they asked, "Is she on oxygen?" The daughters proudly replied, "Yes, of course. It's at the slot machine, holding our spot." Story 19. Damn, I guess my casino is pretty tame. Just old people gambling away their social security checks mostly. But here is a fun casino story to counteract these awful stories. In my casino, we have bankers that sit with the dealers at the tables. These bankers, which is my job, carry the actual chips that pay out bets, as well as pay the casino a commission, so we are allowed to be the bank. We usually carry about $30,000 in chips. Can be more or less. These chips are held in a tray and a small plexiglass box beside the tray. The box is not locked or anything. The box usually has around $25,000 while the tray has the other $5,000. One day we had a particularly busy day and had an unwatched table with chips on it. This is not allowed. We were just very, very stretched thin for people. This table was also close to the door. So a random customer came up and grabbed the box full of chips that sits next to the tray. No one noticed. He had $20,000 in his hands. But he got greedy. He tried to grab the tray as well. These trays are wired into the casino tables, and a glorious sight happened next. He put down the box and grabbed the tray. The tray slingshot due to the wires and chips went flying everywhere. Everyone was looking now. It is a pretty small casino. He grabbed a handful of chips, maybe around 40 chips, and sprinted out the door. With all the chaos, he managed to make it out. All 40 chips he grabbed were purple. In most casinos, purple chips are some of the most valuable ones. They could be $500, $1,000, or $5,000. So of course, this guy thought the same. However, in our casino, they are worth a whopping $2. This guy could have walked out with a nice $25,000, all boxed up and made nicely for him. But greed got to him and he stumbled and sprinted out with $80. What makes this even better is customers should never have purple chips. They are used solely for us to pay the casino commission to bank the games. No other purpose. A few weeks later, the guy or maybe his friend came to cash in the $80 in chips. We caught him instantly. Story 20. My brother was with a friend who brought $3,000 to Campbell. He was playing roulette while my brother went to play a card game. When my brother returned sometime later, his friend had lost $90,000. He approached his friend, and security stopped him. The friend looked at security and said, "No, he is with me." My brother asked how much he had, and he said $90,000. My brother said, "Let me go get $3,000 for you so that you will have what you came in with." His friend said no, that he was on a roll. My brother went to bed. 2 hours later, the friend rushed in the door, begging to borrow money because he had lost the $90,000 but was sure he could win it back. That is when my brother realized his friend had an addiction. Story 21. People died at least once a month. Many chairs had to be professionally cleaned because people would defecate and urinate where they sat. There was sexual activity in the parking structure. All the employees were involved with each other. Tribal leaders attended conferences and trade shows, going on drug and alcohol-fueled benders. Things were wild, and I would go back to working there in a heartbeat. Fun times. Story 22. My brother worked in several Las Vegas hotels, some in hospitality, others in security or housekeeping. He told me many stories. Much of it was just gross. People having sex, doing drugs, vomiting, defecating, or urinating themselves drunk at the pool. Strange swinger types answering the door for food late at night. He found or had to deal with multiple dead bodies from people overdosing or committing suicide in rooms after someone reported a bad smell or someone failed to check out. His most notable story was about a man who won a slot machine jackpot. He took a cash payout and apparently declined security escorting him off the property. Near the exit, someone attacked him and tried to steal the money. It was in a bag, and the attacker cut the man's arm holding the bag to get it away. There was blood everywhere, and an ambulance was called. They believed the attacker was a regular in the slot machine area who felt robbed of the jackpot. Story 23. Question to the casino employees. What percentage of guests there are regulars, you would guess, from Monday through Thursday? Story 24. 40 years ago, my sister and I, both in our early 20s and traveling in a tour group for the first time, were in Las Vegas. On our way to breakfast, an elderly woman offered to sell us her wedding ring. She told us she had no money, had lost it all in the casino, and asked if we would help her. We were terrified and declined. To this day, I have wondered if she was a scammer or truly in need. Story 25. Someone threw themselves off our parking garage. Our on-site emergency medical technician from security arrived quickly but couldn't revive her. He was shaken for quite some time. Someone defecated throughout my entire restaurant, leaving deposits every 10 feet or so for nearly 100 yards while heading to the bathroom. When they came out, they were going to be banned for 24 hours. She insisted she cleaned up, but the manager on duty pointed out remnants between her toes on her sandals, and she was escorted out. The manager was rightfully furious as he stepped in some of it on his way to find her. Someone died by one of the self-serve soda stations. We had to bring out mobile room dividers to put around the person while emergency medical technicians attended to them. People pushed around them to get their free soda. A man waved his shoe at me, holding it nearly to my face, yelling about how he stepped in human feces as if it were my fault. A guest who regularly urinated herself then went to the dance floor to find people to dance with. A man brought a police chase from the next town into our valet area, pulled a gun while exiting the vehicle, and was shot multiple times by the police. We were informed of an active shooter, so we evacuated the building through the kitchens out the back since the threat was at the front. There were many complications from that. I have many stories like these. I will never work in a casino again nor gamble ever. Story 26. I have never gambled. On the day I turned 18, I went to meet some friends at a casino. When I parked, I glanced at the car next to me just in time to see someone put a gun in their mouth and paint the inside of the car with their brains. I thought, lesson learned. Story 27. The cleaner asked me if I could come inspect something he had found in the bathroom. A disgruntled customer defecated in a pint glass and put it in the toilet, creating an unflushable situation. The cleaner leaned forward in the cubicle, raised an eyebrow while looking at me, and said softly, "Watch," as he reached over to flush the toilet. I can only imagine the look of awe and disgust on my face when I saw the waste spin rapidly. Thank you for reading. Story 28. A disgruntled player defecated in a plastic shopping bag and hung it on the coat hook in the accessible bathroom stall. Story 29. A man died of a heart attack during a poker game. The players set up small tents around the body and continued playing with a deceased person lying on the floor less than 5 feet away. Story 30. Visiting Las Vegas for the shows. Spending my designated $20 at the slot machines. Two men who look like brothers, in their mid-20s, wearing rumpled clothes, go over to a large roulette wheel. They place 2 bets of $5,000 each, losing both times. 2 minutes in, and they are done, looking totally shell-shocked. Story 31. I used to work overnight valet at a large casino and witnessed multiple suicides in the parking lot around 5 a.m. On a more lighthearted note, one night someone set their car on fire in an attempted insurance fraud and ended up damaging about 30 surrounding vehicles. There were many angry people standing around that night. Story 32. I used to work in both guest services and the main cage for the vault of the casino. In guest services, we had a request from the band Cool and the Gang, who were performing that evening. Our attached hotel told them their washer and dryer were more industrial and would damage their clothes. So they came to us because the uniforms department was under my supervision in guest services. My shift started after the agreement to have all their laundry done was made. When I came to work, the agreement was explained to me, and the previous supervisor on duty had left for the night. I had been on shift for about 30 minutes when their tour manager came down and started yelling for the supervisor. I went out front to see what was happening. He began yelling at me, saying I was not fulfilling the agreement and that we promised all the clothes would be ready an hour before the show began. The man was screaming in my face and then said the funniest thing I have ever heard. Cool, and the gang will not perform without their underwear. I could tell he immediately regretted saying it. I tried not to laugh. My best was not good enough. When I worked in the cage and was on the slot floor more often, I saw a man who had died. He passed away while spending all the money he had left. Story 33. I worked surveillance for a year. The 360-degree pan-tilt zoom cameras can zoom in on patrons engaging in inappropriate behavior in the parking lot. We can even describe details clearly. I've seen it all. Death, inappropriate human behavior, drug use, fighting, sex, and more. The worst experience for me was watching a well-dressed, 60-year-old woman stand up from her seat, urinate on herself, and then sit back down. She was right next to the bathroom but was so addicted to her game she couldn't be bothered. She was banned after trying to fight security. Her husband was mad at security at first, but then he looked down at her soaked white capri pants and started dragging her out while she was screaming. Before housekeeping could clean the seat, another patron sat in it and didn't care. Another patron expelled feces from their shorts, causing someone else to slip and fall. The person responsible kept walking as the injured patron was on the ground. Story 34. I was a table games dealer. I have seen all kinds of unpleasant things, but this particular incident bothered me. A regular couple was playing at my table, and they were drinking more than usual. The woman brought up the subject of her breasts being fake but very nice. It seemed like she wanted to show them off, so she did, flashing the whole table. Casino security just laughed it off and told her not to do it again. I was appalled. Later, the husband went to the bar to get more drinks and met a female friend. They walked right past the wife at the table to go to her car to get more gambling money and chat. When they walked by, the wife was staring them down. She sat there for a bit and said she would be right back. She got up and went to the front door just as he and the woman were entering. She started yelling and screaming at him and was punching him while he was shielding himself. Security stood there watching, slack-jawed. They only intervened when he pushed her away and she fell down. The security was mostly useless. I understand their limitations, but they did nothing when she exposed herself to everyone. If a man had done that, it would have been jail time. A couple of days later, he came in and filled me in on some of the details discussed above. Story 35. One time we were notified that someone broke into a hotel room, tied a housekeeper to a bed, and then set it on fire. There was a large fire and a police response. The legal team conducted an investigation and found that it was all staged by the employee. I was also working during the October 1st shooting, which was quite awful. Story 36. I was doing security at a casino in the poker room. It was around 2 a.m. and quiet. There was one high roller table in play. An Asian man was sitting there, miserable after losing most of his chips. The dealer dealt a hand and accidentally misdealt. He dealt a hand to a woman who was sitting next to a man, but she was not in the game. The hand was declared dead. The Asian man flipped over pocket aces, screamed something in a language I did not understand, threw his drink into the dealer's face, and leapt at him. By the time I got there, on the other side of the room, he was pinned under 3 men, kicking and screaming. Do not assault your dealer at a table. It will not end well for you. Story 37. There was an old lady who would play $5 blackjack almost all night. Sometimes she would run out of money and use the automated teller machine, but sometimes she would even hit her withdrawal limit. She would stay in the casino until midnight, then her withdrawal limit would reset, and she could keep gambling. She would hit her limit again for the day and finally head home around 4 to 6 in the morning. She would return around 11 in the morning when the tables reopened but would forget she had hit her withdrawal limit a few hours earlier. She would just relax in the casino until the limit reset again at midnight and then start the whole cycle over. These sessions would last 3 to 5 days, and then she would be gone for about half a month until the next time. Story 38. I heard of a casino owner who bankrupted several casinos and sexually assaulted many women. He then went on to be president of the United States. Story 39. I was born and raised in a state where gambling is legal. I worked in security for a while. Suicides on casino property were quite common, usually occurring in hotel rooms or parking garages. Story 40. In the past, security has found children left in cars in the parking lot for hours while the parent inside was intoxicated and gambling. That is likely the most serious situation. Story 41. I saw hotel security do some awful things, including several instances of them assaulting guests. They followed guests to their rooms and then claimed they were invited. Nasty behavior. Story 42. This might be the saddest post I have ever read. I am not looking for suggestions about worse posts. Story 43. I worked in 3 different casinos in various departments. The worst thing in all of them was the constant presence of gambling addicts chasing the jackpots and wasting every cent they had, day after day, week after week, and month after month. Story 44. A friend who has worked in casinos for over 10 years told me that at least one person dies there every month on average. Story 45. Not a casino, but a pre-class 3 tribal bingo hall back in the 1990s in Oklahoma. Players would come up and say, "I've got to win tonight, or I won't be able to pay my utility, car, or house payment." I always wanted to tell these people to go back home and return when they have money to spend. Another common question was, what are the winning numbers? As if I knew. If I really knew, I would have the place packed with my relatives. Some came in literally every day, as if this was the only important thing in their lives. I felt sorry for them. This was the first time I saw hardcore addiction that did not involve substance abuse, and it was sad to watch. Story 46. Depends on your definition of worst. I have seen everything from deceased bodies to parents abandoning their children to gamble, and elderly men soiling themselves. Story 47. Worked on a stationary riverboat, and when I went out to smoke on my break, I saw not 1 but 2 people jump off the nearby bridge. In the 6 years I worked there, I heard they took their lives intending either to win big or to jump. Story 48. Casino surveillance manager with 20 years of experience. I have seen more than a half-dozen people die, attempted suicides, overdoses, infants left alone in cars for hours, seizures, heart attacks, people soiling themselves on purpose, and much more. You get used to it after a while. Story 49. Worked security and performed a wellness check on a woman playing slots. She had urinated on herself, and it was dripping from the chair to the floor. She declined medical services, so we asked her to leave. She grabbed a trash bag from a nearby housekeeping cart and asked if she could wrap it around herself and stay to continue playing slots. Story 50. Worked part-time as a valet in my late teens. I saw a man who appeared intoxicated give me his keys and walk around the back of the casino. I parked his car and notified a security guard that I saw him go around the back. Security could not find him for the next 2 hours until they discovered his body drowned in a lake. I do not know much about his story. He was not visibly intoxicated when I parked his car, but high levels were found later. Story 51. Logical reasoning and this woman were as far apart as they come. She had a slew of mental issues besides her drug addiction. The saddest part was I was told by the people who knew her in the area that she used to be an Olympic runner before the drugs and mental psychotic episodes. Story 52. I am not a casino worker, but I have a short tale. My child wanted to gamble when they became of age, so on their birthday we went to a casino. They brought $200 and left with $100 after losing $100. The gift of being able to recognize the situation and the odds was probably a good gift. I bought them dinner to celebrate the birthday and life lesson. Story 53. A friend of mine worked in the high rollers room. People flew in from other countries to play there using large limits. They had to keep replacing the seats because players would go to the toilet without leaving them. Some people played with millions for over 24 hours straight. Story 54. Never worked there, but fun story. I literally took my mom to the casino yesterday. I don't really gamble, so I was stretching $20. I sat down at a machine and some guy came up behind me and angrily said, "Bro, I was on this. I've been feeding the machine." I was just like, "Okay, you crazy-eyed weirdo." The guy said he just got up to get another 100. Story 55. I was a dealer/table game supervisor and had 3 people die while playing my games during a career spanning over 20 years. The first incident was the worst, but all 3 were horrible situations. Story 56. People reaching over us to play or spin while we are programming a patient to see if that slot machine is now lucky or not. This happens more often than you might think. Story 57. As a teenager, I worked at an outdoor fair with a casino in a tent. At the end of the night, around midnight, I would walk by to get to my ride. People left their strollers with sleeping children outside the tent because minors were not allowed inside. I never heard of any children getting abducted, but there was always a chance with so many people leaving the park and no parents around. Story 58. Watched my aunt walk out of the casino at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning. She is a teacher and on her way to school. Story 59. Multiple people who urinated and defecated on themselves because they sat at the same machine for 8 to 12 hours without moving. A woman kicked a security guard like Bruce Lee while she was in handcuffs because she bet her car and lost. The funniest was watching 4 people being taken out by 8 Pennsylvania state troopers for cheating when I was coming back from lunch. The double doors burst open like something from Dragnet. Also funny was when a woman around 70 to 80 years old pinched me while I was on a ladder hanging up a clock. She and her friend ran away giggling. Story 60. First place. A woman won $200 at the karaoke contest. She walked over to the cashier's cage where I was working, wearing a short skirt, long jacket, and lace corset, and told me, "I've always had this fantasy about being intimate on a pile of money. Are you interested? I am not an attractive person." Second place. I asked a visibly pregnant woman to leave the casino when she tried to cash her welfare check. The pit manager approached and said, "Officially, I am supposed to tell you to never do anything like that again. Unofficially, nice job." Third place. A blackjack dealer exchanged his entire paycheck for dollar tokens to use in the slot machines. 2 weeks' pay was gone in 15 minutes. Honorable mention. The Elvis impersonator had a couple of amazing backup singers. It became well known that if you were in the hallway behind the stage exactly 45 minutes after the performance started, they would treat you to some very enthusiastic costume changes. Bless their little 5-foot-tall red-headed hearts. Story 61. As someone who has gone no contact with my gambling-addicted father, only partially because of the gambling, it is horrible that I was looking through this to see if I recognized him in any of the stories. Story 62. A worker reported that one of the security guard's daily tasks is to check the parking lot for suicides. Story 63. I had a job at one of the malls on the Las Vegas Strip about 20 years ago. Honestly, I don't really have any horror stories because I was just selling shirts, hats, and similar items. I will say the worst smell I have ever experienced in my entire life was working that job. The dumpster for the casino and restaurants was located between the employee parking garage and the entrance to the building. During 120-degree summer heat, the odor was overwhelming. I had to hold my breath going in for my shifts every single day. Imagine an extremely unpleasant stench, and that's about what it smelled like. Story 64. A woman's husband came looking for her and found her at a blackjack table. He screamed, "We are losing our house because of this." He was very upset, and it was early in the morning. I'll never forget his face, frantic and desperate. One time, an old man walked into the casino, paused, stood still for a moment, shook his leg, and continued on. It turned out he had an accident and kicked the mess out of his pant leg. I have millions of stories. Story 65. A long time ago, I was a server working the breakfast shift in a casino restaurant. I spotted an elderly man in a booth, quietly crying. Being young and inexperienced, I asked my manager to talk to him. He had just retired after working his entire life as a union painter. He took his union retirement money as a lump sum, bought a round-trip bus ticket to our resort town, and lost every penny. He had even cashed in his return bus ticket home and lost that money too. The casino fed him breakfast, bought him a one-way bus ticket home, and paid the cab fare to the bus station. It has been years, and I still think about that man. Story 66. I have just done quick sets at roulette and blackjack. I have won the most playing roulette. How quickly can a house tell I am playing with an advantage? It is really easy to keep track of a true count, even with a 6-shooter deck, and make quick money. Story 67. I have a free slot game with no money involved. I lose my free coins, but I have not been to a casino in a year. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.